A masked man steals from his own mother. What Jesus revealed changed everything in a moment. Luke stood outside Margaret's diner, the neon sign flickering like a warning. The smell of fresh coffee seeped through the cracks in the door, reminding him of every pie she had made, every laugh shared. His heart raced, a drum of conflict pounding in his chest. It wasn't supposed to be this way. He was 35 and still a grocery clerk, labeled lazy by coworkers who hurled assessments like stones. Every sigh he heard echo from storefronts was a reminder of his failures. But tonight, desperation clawed at him, urging him to act on a plan that had ignited in the shadows of his mind. Stealing from his own mother? An idea that bloomed like a weed, fed by the pressures of bills and her unwavering hopes. The weight of her faith in him settled like a stone around his neck. In that moment of reckoning, he felt he was drowning, and he was the one holding his mother's dreams underwater. He could picture her now, hands worn and gentle, working tirelessly in her diner, her laughter echoing underlines of hope. Yet, thinking back to her smile made his chest tighten. How could he betray all that? The decision coiled tightly in his gut, unrelenting. Tears threatened to spill. He wiped his eyes against the fabric of his sleeve. But guilt slipped away into justifications. He'd replace the money. It would just be for a moment. If only he could breathe a little easier, find a way out. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. He slipped inside the diner after hours, the musty smell of old grease and sweet pastries clinging to the air like memory. His heart drummed loudly, every beat echoing his internal discord. Each empty table felt like a judgment, each shadow a reminder of the betrayal he was about to commit. Even in the darkness, the diner felt alive. His mother's essence lingered everywhere, and the thought made him hesitate. As he filled the bag, every coin seemed to scream his name, taunting him with his betrayal. In that clammy silence, a wrenching wave of remorse crashed over him. He staggered back, the bag falling from his hands. It rolled awkwardly, a harbinger of his shame. Luke stumbled out into the night, the cool air a slight balm against the intensity of his anguish. Each step reverberated with regret, the weight of his actions heavier than he ever thought possible. And then he saw Mr. Carter, the church elder, standing under a flickering streetlight, wise eyes piercing through Luke's mask of complacency. "What's wrong, son?" Mr. Carter asked, his voice steady, almost unnerving. The elder knew, it seemed. Their conversation unfolded in the cool air, and Luke was ensnared by tales of forgiveness, often given, yet seldom sought. Fear wrestled with the echo of his mother's laughter, and he was caught, suspended between pain and an aching desire to make things right. But how could he face her now? As he pondered those haunting questions, he realized, could love for her ever outweigh this betrayal? Should he confess, or let her continue believing he was the son she deserved? Under the weight of these questions, he glanced back at the diner, her world and his, heavy with anguish. The path to redemption glimmered faintly in the distance, but the fear of losing everything he had clenched him in its icy grip. Standing at that crossroads, Luke's heart thundered, caught between guilt and love, with the storm of uncertainty raging inside him. Luke paced restlessly outside the diner, each footfall intermingling with the fading echoes of Mr. Carter's wise words. His mind was a tempest of emotions, a swirling mass of guilt, fear, and a flicker of hope that felt dangerously fragile. This was not the man he wanted to be. As he meandered through the darkened streets, the silence loomed heavily. His thoughts grappled with the enormity of his actions. Every time he let the notion of betrayal justify his choices, a gut-wrenching sensation gnawed in his stomach, forcing him to confront the reality that he was poised to shatter everything his mother had built. Her dreams for him clashed violently with his own failures, merging into a wretched dichotomy that threatened to drown him. Seeking shelter from his spiraling thoughts, he slipped into a nearby park, the cool breeze whispering through the branches, invigorating him, yet finding solace in the emptiness. Here, the shadows mirrored his internal struggle. Luke sank onto a bench, the cold metal biting into him, a reminder of his discomfort. He needed clarity, a way to disentangle the web he'd woven around himself. It was then that he spotted an old playground, notably vacant. The swing creaked softly in the breeze, an invitation to revisit his childhood, a time unmarred by the weight of responsibilities. Searching for an anchor in dark waters, he rose, feeling uncharacteristically drawn to the laughter of long-forgotten days. As he pushed himself back and forth, he envisioned his mother seated nearby, keeping a watchful eye while he explored the world. Those moments of innocence felt like remnants of a life he was rapidly abandoning. That swing, uneven and rusty, held a promise. It represented the child Luke lost in the pressures of adulthood, buried beneath expectations, his own and those imposed by others. He released a bitter laugh, a hollow sound that echoed across the empty park. What am I doing? Stealing from the source of love and support? Just as he was lured back into the haunting clutches of confusion, he felt a sudden surge of determination coursing through him. No longer could he accept being defined by his failures or by the judgments of others. Would he remain the same man who thought so little of himself that he would betray his own mother? The answer came crashing down with a flood of clarity. He was better than this petty despair. Placing both feet firmly on the ground, he stood up, heart pulsing with renewed energy. He would not let dark impulses dictate his actions any longer. Luke felt a new resolve crystallizing within him. If he truly wanted to change his life, it had to begin with honesty, both with himself and with his mother. Resolutely, he turned back toward the diner, ready to confront the storm brewing within. To face Margaret was to face his own reflection, a journey into the depths of vulnerability that scared him most. Would she understand the desperation that led him to the brink of betrayal? He imagined her forgiveness, her arms enveloping him in acceptance. As the diner came into view, the neon glow felt both inviting and ominous. He steadied his breath. The night was about to unveil a new chapter, and there was no turning back. Luke approached the doors, but hesitated once more, dread mingling with a flicker of excitement. He had decisions to make, the consequences of which would alter the course of his life. Yet, as he reached for the handle, the nagging question returned. Would redemption come at the cost of losing the only life he had known? It was not merely a door that awaited opening, but a deeper dive into his true self. In that moment of hesitation, clarity sparked in his mind. He no longer wanted to wear a mask, not just for himself, but also for his mother. How would she react, he wondered, if she discovered the truth? And more importantly, would that revelation summon the courage he desperately needed? Pushing open the diner's door, Luke was greeted by the warm glow of yellow light and the comforting smell of coffee. The familiar chatter of patrons felt almost foreign as he stepped inside, bringing a world of uncertainty along with him. He scanned the room until his eyes found Margaret. She sat at their usual booth, a steaming cup of coffee nestled between her hands, her expression revealing a mix of concern and warmth. The sight of her was both a balm and a shackle. Once inside, every step toward her felt monumental. The sounds around him faded, and his pulse quickened, a rhythmic reminder of his anxious determination. The moment had arrived, and Luke recognized that he was not just stepping into the diner, but into a tempest of truth. "Hi, Mom," he said softly, dropping into the opposite seat. His voice scratched through the silence he created, betraying the turmoil.
"Luke," she replied, her voice steady yet laced with a tremor. "I was starting to worry. You were gone longer than usual." He could see the shadows of doubt darting across her face. It tore at him. She deserved better than this anxious version of her son. His stomach twisted at the thought of what he was about to reveal. "Yeah, I needed some air." Her brow furrowed. "Something's bothering you. You know you can talk to me." The words sat between them like an open wound, and Luke felt the weight of what he had done crash upon him. How could he untangle the mess he had made without tearing further at the fabric of their relationship? He clenched his fists, anchoring himself as a plan formed in his mind. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, the words tumbling out like a hurried confession, "about what's right and wrong, and what I've done that isn't right." Margaret leaned forward, her intent gaze fixed on him. "What are you talking about?" Taking a shaky breath, he forced his eyes to meet hers. "Mom, I was given a chance to take something from the shop. Money that wasn't mine. I almost did it." Shock registered in her expression, pure disbelief radiating as he pushed on, unraveling his stumbling story. He recounted his thoughts the night of temptation, the moment he thought he could justify his actions, and the guilt that had followed. Each word was a step deeper into the vulnerability he feared, yet he pressed on. Something was shifting within him, a combative spirit igniting against the fear of judgment. "I didn't do it," he added, relieved by the admission. "I almost let myself fall into something dark, but I chose not to." His voice lowered, hardened by conviction. "I want to change, Mom. I need you to know that." Margaret's voice quivered as she spoke. "Luke, you could have told me. We could have figured it out together. You don't have to carry this alone." Her words were an oasis in his emotional desert, soothing the parched places where wounds felt fresh. Yet doubt gnawed at him. "What will you think of me after this?" Moving her hand across the table, she enveloped his in hers. "I think you're brave for speaking up. I think we all struggle, and what matters most is what you choose to do next." That clear, unwavering gaze ignited a flicker of hope inside him. While they held each other's gaze, the enormity of what lay ahead weighed heavily on Luke. This was merely the beginning, a small victory on a long road ahead. But he could feel his resolve harden, the tremors of uncertainty still present, but quieter now, less threatening. Yet in the background of this epiphany lurked questions that demanded answers. How would he rebuild trust? Would he prove himself to be the man his mother always believed him to be? The moment felt pivotal, an intersection of past mistakes and future aspirations. Questions flitted through his mind, unrelenting. Was mere honesty enough to heal the rift he had created? Deep in contemplation, he squeezed her hand, sensing the tether of their bond pulling taut. He had taken the first step toward redemption, but the path was still obscured. And then, amidst this fragile newfound clarity, he realized tomorrow would demand more than just honesty. Could he show up with the same courage he had summoned tonight when faced with new challenges? As they sat in silence, waiting for the next words to unfurl, Luke couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part of his journey was just beginning. As the morning sun streamed through the diner's windows, casting stripes of light across the table, Luke felt its warmth seep into him, a stark contrast to the chill of uncertainty that had followed him into this moment. He and Margaret sat in the booth, their hands still joined, anchoring him as he contemplated the gravity of their conversation. Though clarity flickered like a candle in a draught, the shadows of his past lingered, threatening to snuff it out. "I need to figure out how to make this right," he said, his voice steadier now, fortified by resolve. "It's not just about telling you. I need to change my actions, or else this will happen again." Margaret nodded slowly. "The first step is recognizing what you did. But it can't stop there, Luke. You have to understand why you were even tempted in the first place." Her insight pierced him,
Guilt churned in his stomach. Why had he even considered it? The pressures he barely acknowledged finally surfaced, revealing fears of inadequacy, falling short of what others expected of him. Maybe it's fear, he conceded, staring into his half-empty cup of coffee. Fear of not being good enough, of messing up again. I thought the money could help. I don't know. Margaret's gaze remained steadfast, her grip on his hand tightening slightly. This fear you speak of, it can be paralyzing or motivating. If you harness it, you could transform those feelings into something powerful. The concept intrigued him. What if this fear, rather than being a weight, could be a catalyst for growth? He had spent so long avoiding challenges, retreating from pressures, but perhaps the path to resolution lay in confronting them head-on. Recognizing his potential might allow him not only to redeem himself, but to stand proud, a man defined not by mistakes, but by his efforts to overcome them. Where do I start? The question surprised him. It flowed from a place of growing determination. Look for opportunities to earn trust back, Margaret suggested softly. Your integrity will shine as you make choices that align with who you want to be. A flicker of inspiration lit within Luke. He had been on autopilot for far too long, reacting instead of planning his journey. Setting specific goals might create a framework, an avenue to demonstrate his commitment.
Maybe I should volunteer somewhere or help out at the shop more, he mused. Something that forces me to be accountable, pushes me out of my comfort zone. Margaret smiled, proud of his budding initiative. That's a start. And remember, it's not just about what you do for others. You'll also need to take some time to truly understand yourself, what you value, what you love. As she spoke, Luke felt an urge to explore the depths of his identity. The art supplies he had tucked away might spark a fire he had long neglected. Would embracing these interests help him reshape his self-image, perhaps even teach him to trust himself again? I want to find balance, he declared, the words spilling forth with newfound conviction. I want to be the person who can inspire others rather than letting them down. A thought snaked into his mind. But what if he didn't know how to become that person? The unsettling contrast between aspiration and the potential for failure gnawed at him. Could he genuinely change, or would he be destined to fall back into the cycle of dishonesty and shame? The weight of this uncertainty settled over him again, yet something had shifted. The possibility of change felt less like a burden and more like a road beckoning him forward. Change takes time, Margaret reminded him gently, sensing his internal struggle. You need to make peace with that. As they sat in contemplation, a heavy silence enveloped them. Luke felt the stakes rising yet again. He was no longer merely contending with his mistakes, but entering a realm where the choices he made would define his future. Realizations flooded in. The next step demanded both courage and commitment, a bridge between the man he was and the man he wished to be. But as he formulated a plan, a sudden wave of fear crashed over him. Would he seriously stick to this newfound commitment? The challenge set in motion felt monumental. With each passing moment, he sensed that a threshold loomed large, one that would force him to confront not just his past, but also what lay ahead. And so, Luke stared into the folds of uncertainty that lay before him, the path of redemption unfurling with a mix of excitement and dread. Then it struck him. What he feared most was not failure itself, but the possibility of success. The next day would demand fresh courage, as he found himself pushed to face not only others, but the man in the mirror. Would he rise to the occasion, or allow his fears to drown him again? With that question echoing in his mind, Luke braced for the journey ahead, where every choice could either bind him or set him free. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Luke awoke, the patterns of its light filtering through the blinds, cascading onto his bedroom floor as an unwelcome alarm sounded from his phone. Another day loomed ahead, thick with expectations and uncertainties. Today, he wasn't just facing his fears, he was set to redefine the contours of his character.
After a quick shower, he seated himself on a chair near the window, the morning's quiet broken only by the distant hum of traffic. Reflecting on his discussion with Margaret, he thought of the goals he'd set. Acting with purpose would be his first step, a commitment, not just a fleeting idea. He picked up his old sketchbook, the one collecting dust on the shelf, and flipped through its pages. Drawings from years past stared back at him, rich with emotion yet unfulfilled promise. Grabbing a pencil, he hesitated for a moment, breath trembling as his thoughts wrestled with anxiety. It had been years since he allowed himself such unguarded expression. If he were to reclaim this aspect of himself, vulnerability would have to accompany courage. As he began to sketch, the familiar lines took form, reflecting his state of mind. Jagged, messy strokes interspersed with brief moments of serenity. Art had always been a refuge, yet he associated it with the same sense of failure that burdened him in other areas of his life. But today, he pushed through. With each stroke of the pencil, he felt a release. Perhaps this could serve not only as a bridge to his past, but as a foundation for the man he aspired to become. The resolve strengthened as he made plans to approach the local community center about volunteering. The prospect seemed daunting, engaging with people, confronting the judgments of others, facing the implications of being that guy who made mistakes. Yet, he reminded himself, the pressure to live up to expectations had, for too long, dictated his choices. With the fresh resolve fueling him, he grabbed his phone and dialed the number from memory. "Hello, is this the community center?" he asked the voice on the other end. "Yes, how can I help you?" "I want to volunteer. I'd love to help with anything." He hesitated, the fear licking at the edges of his confidence. "Children's programs or art classes, I'm flexible." The woman on the other line paused, and he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Had he overstepped? Perhaps they had no need for a troubled artist. "That's wonderful. We always need more helping hands, especially with the kids' art program. When would you like to start?" Luke exhaled his relief. "I can come in tomorrow." "Great, I'll see you then." As he hung up, exhilaration coursed through him. One step taken, however small, it was undeniably forward. Connections flourished through shared experiences, and he might soon forge new relationships that didn't carry the weight of his past. Armed with zeal, he turned his focus back to the sketchbook. The initial strokes had given way to a portrait that slowly unveiled itself, a self-portrait perhaps, or just the essence of a man seeking redemption. The face stared back at him, eyes full of raw potential, mixed with remnants of doubt. Day slipped away into a blur. Every brush of the pencil served to embed deeper into him the understanding that failure did not have to cloak his future, nor silence the voice within. The clarity he sought screamed for attention. The art he had abandoned could serve not only as a catalyst for healing, but also as a means of connection with others. By evening, Luke felt the weight of impending change hover above him. As he readied himself for bed, a thought struck. Success could hinge on the simplest of actions. Would he truly allow this opportunity to pass when it offered the chance to sculpt both himself and the lives of others? Stepping into the unknown was frightening, yet he felt whispers of readiness coaxing him forward. Success might not appear as a triumphant cry, but as a soft, steady hum of courage nestled within his choices. Tomorrow would unveil a new chapter in his tale, but the anticipation brewed within him. What challenges awaited? Would his artistic fire invoke inspiration in those around him, or would he falter in his resolve? He closed his eyes, heart's appetency swirling at the possibilities, ready to embrace whatever dawn awaited. The next morning, the sun poured through the window, igniting Luke's anticipation for the day ahead. He could feel the cool air against his skin as the weight of his commitment loomed. Today was not merely about art or volunteering, it marked the beginning of his transformation. He dressed deliberately, choosing a shirt that felt comfortable yet professional, as if trying to merge his outer image with the man he aspired to be.
Each item worn was a symbol of the choices he was making, choices designed to fortify his identity rather than cloak it in shame. He glanced in the mirror, searching for signs of the resolve he had nurtured. The face looking back seemed a mixture of nervousness and tenacity, both reflecting an uncharted potential. As he gathered his supplies, sketchbooks, pencils, and a modest assortment of his work, excitement mingled with anxiety. He replayed the moments of yesterday in his mind, the exhilaration of committing to volunteering that had surged through him. Was it enough? Could he hold the pieces together when met with the raw honesty of children and their unfiltered needs? Climbing into his car, a mixture of self-doubt and determination battled within him. Would they see through the facade, the past that lingered like a shadow? He steered toward the community center, each turn in the road drawing him closer to his goal, but also amplifying the trepidation resting in the pit of his stomach. Upon arrival, the center buzzed with children's laughter and the playful chaos of youthful energy. The atmosphere was charged with creativity. Luke hesitated in the entrance, absorbing the vibrant chaos. His heart raced as memories of rejection and loneliness flooded back. But he took a deep breath and stepped into the whirl of color and sound. This was his environment now. He would create
A new narrative. "Hi, you must be Luke." A woman approached him, exuding warmth and invitation. Her name was Jessica, the art program coordinator. "You're just in time. The kids are finishing up a project, and then we can start with what you'll be doing here." "Yes, I'm looking forward to it," he managed, forcing the words past his lips. His pulse quickened with each passing second, and behind her enthusiasm he sensed her sincerity. As Jessica led him to the art room, Luke's resolve wavered momentarily. He felt like an outsider, a visitor observing others about to dive into the fray while he hesitated on the periphery. What if he couldn't contribute? What if he simply didn't belong? When the door swung open, a cacophony of colorful chaos hit him. Young artists crowded tables, their voices intertwining with laughter and shouts of triumph. Panic threatened to seize him again as he thought of his past failures, but he forced the doubt down, reminding himself that today was about growth, not perfection. At the front, a group of eager faces turned to him. Each one radiated an uninhibited creativity Luke longed to foster within himself. A girl with wild curls and paint-splattered fingers approached him cautiously. "Are you here to help us draw? What's your favorite thing to draw?" The innocent curiosity tugged at Luke's heart. "I like drawing people," he answered, his voice steadier than it felt. "Can you teach us?" came the excited reply from the boy beside her. Moments like this, the unfiltered need for guidance, can crack even the hardest shells. Luke sensed the familiar warmth he'd once felt sketching alone in his room, now enveloped in this vibrant atmosphere. He stood at the front of the room, the warmth swelling within him, and began to engage. With each demonstration and every shared laugh, the eagerness of the children mirrored his own burgeoning hope. Every brushstroke, every shared story breathed new life into his purpose. But just as realization began to crystallize within him, he noticed a boy retreating at the back, scribbling furiously but avoiding eye contact. Should he confront the boy, or would it be best to let him be? Something deep within Luke urged him to reach out. The need to connect transcended his fears. But as he approached, a tension stirred deep inside him. Would he falter in this moment? Would confronting this hidden sorrow prove too much for him to handle? The horizon of new possibilities lay before him, yet so did the uncertainty of personal confrontation. Tomorrow's revelations awaited him, pushing him ever closer to a decision that would either solidify his rising confidence or unravel it entirely. Would he rise to the occasion or remain shackled by his past? As Luke moved toward the boy in the corner, a myriad of questions surged in his mind. Why was this child shying away? What raw truth lay behind his avoidance? Each step felt heavy with purpose, yet laced with fear. Would reaching out unravel the very fabric of the strength he had begun to weave?
"Hey there," Luke said softly, kneeling beside the table to bring himself to eye level. The boy's wide eyes flicked toward him, witnessing a stranger challenging the fortress he'd built around himself. "I'm Luke. I noticed you were drawing. Can I see what you've created?" The boy hesitated, the flicker of defensiveness evident in his posture. "It's nothing," he mumbled, as if the admission of nothing was a protective barrier. "That's not true," Luke replied, leaning closer, allowing sincerity to saturate his voice. "Every line you make is something. Can you show me?" He felt the slight tremor beneath the boy's gaze, a tremor that mirrored his own inner turmoil. It dawned on Luke that this was not merely about art. It was an invitation to connect, to share vulnerability. Slowly, the boy slid his sketch toward Luke, revealing a turbulent scene filled with jagged lines and distorted figures, an expressive representation of chaos that resonated with Luke's own hidden struggles. The artwork told stories of anger, confusion, and perhaps a yearning to be understood, feelings Luke knew all too well. "Wow, this is powerful," Luke whispered, holding the drawing gently. "There's so much emotion here. What inspired you to create this?" The boy shifted in his seat, his initial defensiveness beginning to crack. "I don't know. I just was feeling stuff." A profound silence enveloped them, a shared recognition that reached beyond words. Luke leaned in closer, compelled to convey something that had taken him years to understand, the transformative power of expression. "You know, when I was younger, I often felt overwhelmed by my emotions too. Drawing helped me make sense of it. Maybe it can help you as well." The boy stole a glance at Luke, his defenses beginning to lower as curiosity peaked. Little by little, Luke felt a connection build, one founded not on authority, but on shared experience. The boy started to speak, his voice steadier now as he revealed the pain and chaos underlying his art, a cascade of feelings spilling forth into their shared space. Luke listened intently, providing gentle prompts, recognizing the depth of this moment. More than just art, this was about reaching through the layers of fear and shame, the first steps toward empowerment. With each word exchanged, Luke's confidence grew, awakening the dormant artist within him, someone capable of navigating not only paint, but also people's hearts. He couldn't help but wonder, was his own healing tied into this moment of connection? Could guiding this boy lead to revelations even he had yet to uncover? Luke could feel the transformation coursing through him, the process of sharing becoming as essential as the art itself. As the workshop continued, Luke's newfound purpose rippled outwards, impacting the others in the room. He prompted their creativity, encouraging each child to share their stories, to embrace their emotions fearlessly. The risk of vulnerability had begun to translate into strength, a lesson imparted not just from him, but also through the myriad voices they shared. But lingering still was that penetrating fear. Would reiterating these themes of vulnerability lead him back to the painful fragments of his own youth? Could he rise to meet the upcoming challenges without falling into despair again? And most troubling was the shadow of the boy's earlier isolation. Luke's connection with him blossomed, yet he sensed the other children wrestling silently with their own unresolved battles. As laughter and voices filled the room, the realization struck him. Tomorrow's session would test them all. Could they face themselves anew? Would the courage he cultivated today help him confront his own shadows, as the walls around him began to close in once more? He had taken a significant step forward today, yet the path ahead felt tangled and uncertain. Tomorrow promised confrontation, and it was approaching fast. Would he stand strong amidst the trials waiting in the shadows, or would he falter, afraid of the ghosts lurking from his past? The morning sun spilled light into the workshop, illuminating faces tinged with anticipation and shadowed by uncertainty. Luke stood at the front, the weight of the coming day pressing heavily against his chest. He could feel their energy, a mixture of curiosity and anxiety swirling around him, and it matched the storm inside his mind. Today was not merely about creating art. It was about revealing truths, forging connections, and confronting the deeper challenges that lay ahead. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders,
casting aside the fear gnawing at his resolve. "Today," he announced, adopting a tone that balanced authority with warmth, "we're going to explore our stories further. I know all of you have something important to share, and I believe that sharing can be incredibly powerful." The room fell silent, and he could see the doubt weaving through their expressions. Would they also find strength in vulnerability? Luke was acutely aware of the very real possibility that his own fears might echo among them. What if showering them with this lesson revealed more than he was ready to confront? As he moved through the room, he stopped at the boys' table, where he found the sketch still resting like a testament to its creator's struggle. "Your work has so much depth," Luke said gently. "Why don't you share what it means to you with the group this time?" The boy's eyes widened, fear washing over his face. "I can't. What if they laugh?" Luke paused, feeling an unsettling chill run through him. He thought back to his own youth, the cringe of harsh laughter echoing through the years, a reminder of the vulnerability he had tried so hard to escape. "I understand that fear," he admitted, voice steady. "But remember, true strength comes from being honest about our feelings, about who we are. I know sharing is scary, but it's also liberating. You might inspire someone else to express their own pain, just like you've done with your art." The room fell silent, and he could see the doubt weaving through their expressions. Would they also find strength in vulnerability? Luke was acutely aware of the very real possibility that his own fears might echo among them. What if showering them with this lesson revealed more than he was ready to confront? As he moved through the room, he stopped at the boys' table, where he found the sketch still resting like a testament to its creator's struggle. "Your work has so much depth," Luke said gently. "Why don't you share what it means to you with the group this time?" The boy's eyes widened, fear washing over his face. "I can't. What if they laugh?" Luke paused, feeling an unsettling chill run through him. He thought back to his own youth, the cringe of harsh laughter echoing through the years, a reminder of the vulnerability he had tried so hard to escape. "I understand that fear," he admitted, voice steady. "But remember, true strength comes from being honest about our feelings, about who we are. I know sharing is scary, but it's also liberating. You might inspire someone else to express their own pain, just like you've done with your art."
The silence hung thick in the air as he awaited a response. Slowly, the boy's defensive posture began to melt as he considered the words Luke had offered. Then, gathering his thoughts, he finally nodded. "Okay, I'll try." A wave of relief washed over Luke. He glanced around the room, recognizing the shift in energy. Here was an opportunity for growth, for both the boy and himself. They could conquer this together, forging a bond through shared understanding, one that transcended mere mentorship. As the session unfolded, Luke guided each child through their creative process, encouraging candid discussions about feelings and experiences represented in their artwork. The narratives surfacing were raw and poignant, drawing out stories of fear, loss, and love. To his surprise, they didn't just resonate with the children. They churned deep within him, forcing him to confront the recesses of his own past. With each shared story, Luke's emotions surged. Memories of moments where he had felt small, lost, or invisible surged forth, unraveling the tightly knit strands he thought had held him together. As one boy revealed the sadness after his parents' divorce, Luke felt the familiar pang of helplessness clawing at his insides. Could he reveal his own truth without shattering his newfound sense of purpose? When his turn finally came, he hesitated. His heart raced as he contemplated being vulnerable. Would sharing his own struggles diminish the authority he had managed to establish? Yet he realized, in the cacophony of emotions filling the room, that his fear of being diminished was precisely what he had been trying to dismantle within the children. It hit him. In order to empower them, he must also step into the light with his own shadows. "I want you all to know I'm not just your instructor," he began, voice thicker with emotion than he intended. "There was a time when I too felt lost. I struggled to find my voice, to express what I was feeling inside. Art helped me channel that pain into something beautiful. If you will allow me, I'd like to share a piece of my story too." The silence held the weight of their collective breaths, and Luke felt the walls around his heart begin to crack. Every moment that passed became a choice. Would he step forward, embracing vulnerability in a full-circle moment of connection, or retreat into the safe shadows he'd known for too long? The time had come to face his past, not just for himself, but for the sake of those who needed to see the possibility of healing born from honesty. Every nerve in his body screamed against his urge to speak, but within that pressure was a flicker of hope. He realized that perhaps the true essence of connection was found in the moments that scare us the most. Would he truly summon the courage to reveal what lay cloaked within? Would this moment of honesty give him and the children a chance to grow? The air thrummed with tension, as he prepared to unveil a part of himself he had long buried. But the question loomed: was he prepared for the confrontation with his own ghosts, or would they rise to consume him all over again? As Luke stood before the group, he chastised himself for the fear that threatened to paralyze him. The weight of his suppressed truth pressed down on him like a fog, obscuring not just his view, but the very essence of who he had become over the years. The room, filled with bright faces and eager anticipation, seemed to pulsate, each heartbeat syncing with the rising turmoil within him. The children's eyes, wide with expectation, beckoned him to break free from his hesitation. He clenched his fists, silently battling the internal critic that shouted he wasn't worthy of sharing such a deeply personal chapter of his life. Yet, mingled with that voice was another, a voice he had spent so long trying to silence that now surged like the tide, reminding him that this was not merely about him. It was an opportunity to model authenticity and courage. He drew in a shaky breath, breaking the spell of silence. When I was in high school, I felt as if I were an outsider looking in. I was creative, yes, but I didn't quite fit in with my peers. Art became my refuge, but it also reminded me of how alone I felt. His voice faltered as vulnerability prickled his skin, but he pressed on. I distinctly remember one day, my art teacher invited me to showcase my work. I was terrified. I thought, who would want to hear my story? The children leaned in closer, enraptured by his words, and the connection intensifying each moment. Luke shared the details, the whispers of opposition he'd faced, the doubts that had threatened to drown him. With each recollection, threads from his youth tangled into the present, illuminating how much he'd hidden from view. Then came the pivotal moment, the night he had broken, where pain erupted from within, spilling over in a torrent of tears as he sat on his bedroom floor, surrounded by sketches of dreams unfulfilled. I drew a picture of a sunset from my window, but there was a storm brewing behind it. That storm represented the chaos in my life. It took reflecting on that moment to realize how closing myself off to others had only magnified my loneliness. A rush of warmth enveloped him. Sharing his truth twisted something fundamental in the atmosphere of the room. He noticed a shift as the children exchanged knowing glances. It was as if his narrative resonated so profoundly that it shattered their barriers too. One girl, her voice barely above a whisper, shared how she felt invisible amidst family chaos. Another chimed in, recounting struggles she had faced in a new hostile school. As each child uncloaked their history, interwoven stories formed a tapestry of shared experiences and survival. Luke felt their pain, echoing against his own. Was cathartic, a mutual unshackling. Through the ebb and flow of their stories, Luke began to realize something monumental. In being vulnerable, he didn't lose his authority as an instructor. Rather, he earned their respect. The weight he had feared transformed into a bridge, one built from trust and respect to connect their collective experiences.
As the session drew to a close, Luke acknowledged the newfound cohesion amongst them. But beneath the relief lay an undercurrent of uncertainty that wouldn't soon fade. He had ventured into the depths of vulnerability, but he knew this was only the beginning. How would this raw exposure shift his role? What remnants of his past would continue to claw for attention now that they had been unearthed? The clock ticked steadily, a reminder of constraints that urged for resolution, yet he resisted. What remained unsaid gnawed at his thoughts. They had all bared their souls, but he withheld a truth yet untold, one that could bind them further or separate him from the very connections he'd sought to establish. Next week, he said, revealing his intention to continue these sessions, we will explore the strength found in our narratives, but also the courage it takes to tackle our fiercest demons. As he concluded, the words hung on the cusp of a promise or a curse. Luke could feel the shadows of his unresolved ghosts looming larger. He too would need to confront the full weight of his reality, his mother, the betrayal, and the masked man that he feared he still carried within. How would the act of facing those hidden truths shift his path forward? And how would it impact the bond he had begun to forge with his students? He smiled, masking the growing tension in his chest. But inside, he steeled himself for the inevitable reckoning. Desperately, he craved the moment when the budding connections would reveal something more profound about the person he was destined to become. Would the coming week offer the courage he sought to face his own shadows? Or would the ghosts remain, forever whispering their unsettling truths? Luke awoke the next morning to a day ripe with possibilities. The sunlight poured through his window, but it didn't just illuminate his room. It ignited a fire within him. This was more than just another day. It was an essential chapter in the story of his reclamation, of forgiveness, and ultimately of liberation. As he prepared for the workshop, the nagging remnants of fear lingered, but brushed aside by an overwhelming determination. He was entering not just a classroom, but a sanctuary where honesty thrived, a space he had helped construct along with the children. It was this very environment that had compelled him to confront his deepest lies, allowing him the chance to reshape his identity. Stepping inside the community center, the vibrant energy enveloped him, mirroring the dynamic spirit he felt within. His students were setting up their art supplies and chatting with enthusiasm. That trepidation that had overwhelmed him before was replaced by an anticipatory electric pulse. Today would solidify the courage they had all begun to cultivate. And yet he had a monumental insight to share, the sincerity of his shadows and the significance of addressing them. "Good morning, everyone," Luke called, letting the brightness of his voice resonate. "I'm excited for today. I'd like to start by sharing something personal and important to me." The children's attention sharpened, their expressions shifting with curiosity. He felt the precipice of vulnerability rise again, but instead of faltering, Luke chose to leap. He revealed the depth of his past, the betrayal he had almost committed against his mother, the guilt that hung heavy over him, and the clarity he had found through art. He shared how his journey through self-doubt intersected with their own fears, how art helped him process troubling emotions, and how bravery resided in confronting one's truth. He saw their faces shift as they began to empathize, the connection widening, binding them tighter with the threads of collective struggles. These were not just his burdens to carry, they belonged to everyone there. And in that moment, recognizing that shared experience transformed the energy of the room. Luke encouraged each child to voice their own challenges. With every revelation, they peeled back layers of their fears and insecurities, illuminating the spaces of their realities. Each candid story offered an insight into the human experience, of healing, of hope, of resilience. Together, they unearthed stories of loneliness, sadness, and longing, every shared experience knitting them into something stronger than individuals, into a collective of souls healing together. One girl spoke of her challenges with anxiety, her words trembling yet courageous, shifting something monumental within Luke. He nodded, instilling her with confidence. "Thank you for sharing that brave story," he said, watching as her posture eased with the reassurance. "You see, every story has power. We're not just sharing, we're transforming. As the workshop flew by in a flurry of creativity and emotional connection, Luke felt a profound shift within himself. No longer did he feel the tailwind of guilt tugging him backward. Instead, he found the strength to emerge from the shadows. There was no longer a masked man within him. The darkness had begun to dissipate as shards of light broke through, showcasing the potential he had long feared to embrace. By the end of the session, Luke stood before a room filled with uplifted faces, vibrant with inspiration. "Remember," he said, pausing to let the gravity of his words settle, "vulnerability is not weakness. It is a pathway to compassion, both for yourself and others. We've all come together today, and in this space, we can challenge our fears and forge our identities. I want each of you to take this experience as an opportunity to reflect and share even more next week." As the children began to gather their things, Luke caught sight of the boy who had once withdrawn, working on a new drawing filled with vivid colors, swirling around a stormy sky, emphasizing growth alongside chaos. He approached the boy, deeply proud of the progress he was making. "Hey, that's incredible!" Luke exclaimed, bending down to inspect the artwork. "I see the chaos blending with colors. Are those your hopes breaking through?" The boy looked up, surprise dancing in his eyes. "Yeah, I think so." Luke's heart swelled. They had both made strides forward, and that empowered connection affirmed his path. As he finished packing his supplies, reflecting on the transformation that had unfolded in just 1 week, Luke held on to the exhilaration blooming within him. He was affirmatively rebirthing his life, moving past the shame of his actions. Later, as he called Margaret, he shared how the workshop had catalyzed authentic conversations, discussing not just their art, but their truth. He could feel the warmth of pride and love radiating from her voice as she expressed her relief and happiness over his growth. "I'm so proud of you," she told him, and in that moment he felt the weight of shame lift completely. He realized the journey would not end here. It was starting to unfurl, revealing a landscape of opportunities filled with positivity and purpose. Each day would usher opportunities for trust and connection with his mother, his art, and the children who had now become a part of his heart. He had become the embodiment of the values he wished to impart, authenticity and integrity, and this realization invigorated him like never before. Luke accepted that embracing vulnerability defined strength, and he was ready for any challenge in the future. This was the moment. He was reborn, recalibrating not just his life, but the fabric of connections he was weaving, one honest brushstroke at a time. Maybe tomorrow would ask more of him, but he stood resolute. Today he felt renewed, ready to conquer not just the trials ahead, but also equipped to nourish the flame of hope for others who searched for their light. And thus, Luke embraced the future with solid confidence, transforming the resolve that once felt heavy into a catalyst for profound fulfillment. Now you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now if you believe in the power of transformation. Your support feeds the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about Luke's journey. What did his story teach you? And most importantly, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even 1 more second. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.